Good morning. It is Tuesday, the 13th of January. I'm Maeve McMahon, and this is Europe Today, your daily dose of European news and analysis live here on Euronews. Coming up today, all eyes on Greenland. The government has said it cannot accept Donald Trump's desire to take control of their island. For now, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte is avoiding the issue, piling praise on Donald Trump, insisting the alliance is working on ways to bolster Arctic security. This as US Secretary of State Marco Rubio prepares to meet Danish and Greenlandish diplomats tomorrow. For more on what all this means for NATO, our EU editor Maria Tadeo is here with me in the studio. But first, let's just take a listen to both President Donald Trump and the NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte.
If we don't take Greenland, Russia or China will take Greenland. And I am not going to let that happen. And Greenland, basically, their defense is 2 dog sleds. Do you know that? Do you know what their defense is? 2 dog sleds. But one way or the other, we're going to have Greenland.
What I always do is when people are helpful for the alliance and are doing good stuff, and I believe that Donald Trump is doing the right things for NATO. By the way, as we speak, we see Denmark speeding up their investments when it comes to defense, not only generally, but also when it comes to unique capabilities to defend territories like Greenland. So we are really working together here.
So, Maria, Mark Rutte really seems to be in denial there over Greenland. It's getting awkward.
It's getting awkward. And yesterday, that was a very painful press conference to watch because he was asked repeatedly, is there an issue now within NATO when one of its defense partners is clearly now making its territorial ambitions on the land of another country that is also part of the alliance? And he kept repeating, no, we are working together. And we all agree that Arctic security is important. Of course, certainly Arctic security is important in the face of China and Russia, but there is a fundamental question here, which is the United States now for a year, Maeve, remember this, or it started in a press conference in Mar-a-Lago in 2025, has been insisting and has been very consistent in the idea that they need Greenland. Trump says we need it, or the U.S. would need it for national security, and he also talks about the psychological effect that it would have in the country to own it. Now, for the time being, one of the ideas that is being floated just to show President Trump that NATO allies are taking this seriously is to put together a NATO mission or a mission modeled after NATO that would include a significant European component, again, to show security of Greenland and the Arctic is being taken seriously. But of course, there's also another point to this is sort of language that we would say at different times would have been a sort of territorial expansion, imperialism, maybe some suggest there's colonialism behind this. And of course, it's not a secret that Greenland is also an island and a territory that's very rich in rare earth and minerals. All of this piling pressure, of course, on the Danish government to stop this language.
So what more should the Europeans be doing here? Should they not be in crisis mode over Greenland?
Well, and they are in a way. Of course, they worry about the pressure on Denmark. They worry about the pressure on Greenland. We should also note, when you look at polls, 87% of Greenlanders say they do not want to belong to the United States. There is a question about autonomy, but not changing when it comes to now Denmark to the United States. The other point is, of course, the Europeans, the French, the Germans, the UK. There has been many reports, again, this in the context of NATO, that they would be prepared to model and put forward a mission to show that they are taking the Arctic seriously. For the Danish government, they have said, however, and this is one of the most extraordinary statements I've ever seen actually in the past year, that if the US were to make a move, then that would be the end of NATO and that would be the end of the post-Second World War security framework. As I go back, this is a defensive alliance, one member making a move on another member. Of course, it's very hard to see how NATO would have any credibility if that were to happen.
OK, Maria Tadeo, Euronews EU editor, thank you so much for that update. And shortly we can dive deeper into the topic, as coming up we'll be joined by the Danish politician Margrethe Vestager, most famous for her role as EU Commissioner for Competition when President Donald Trump labelled her back then the tax lady. She's known back home for being a government minister and party leader, and in Brussels for going after big techs. We're thrilled to have her here with us in the studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Europe Today.
Well, great to be here.
So lovely to have you here with us in Brussels. I want to urgently ask you many questions about Greenland, but first your thoughts on Iran. What more can the international community do here? What more can the EU do?
Well, I think the steps that has been taken so far, they are, the right steps to say that, well, we're here. Just when the women were hitting the streets, we were there to say, well, we support your cause. And now again, to say, listen, the sanctions, they will be increased. There will be also external pressure because the cries of the Iranians on the streets, the deterioration in their living conditions, the courage that they show, I think that should inspire and impress the rest of the world.
And what about President Donald Trump? His solution is to potentially intervene militarily. Is this something that you would support?
Well, I think that for the Iranians, the solution is not a military solution. It is, of course, for the present regime to step down and for democratic forces to align themselves with a democratic way of ruling the country.
Very challenging indeed.
Yes.
Let's talk about Greenland and Donald Trump's desire to take Greenland. Could he potentially really do that?
Well, I think even for President Trump, for one NATO country to attack another NATO country to acquire territory is really, really far-reaching. And when you look at the asks of security and cooperation on minerals, there is, I think, a very open approach from the Greenlandic government and population, and of course also from a Danish side. And there's been a long-standing cooperation. The treaty with the US goes back to 1951 as when it comes to security.
And what role should the European Union be playing here? What should the Europeans be doing?
Well, Europe has increased its interest for Greenland over the last 10 years. Now there is a representation of the European Commission in Greenland. I think that's really important. There is a memorandum of understanding when it comes to the exploration of critical minerals and rare earth and what have you. So even though Greenland is not part of the European Union, well, it's a relationship that can be increased. And the first steps, they have been taken in previous years. Well,
some previous politicians are today calling for them to be a member, that Brussels should invite them back in. They did reverse their membership back in the day.
Well, I think so many decisions are for the Greenlandic people, for them to take. It's their country. They don't seem to be at all in any kind of mindset to sell their country. If they ever want to join the European Union again, it's for them to start that discussion.
But if Trump did move in, could that be the end of NATO, as some are saying?
Well, I think that is almost, I know that President Trump says that he's not reined in by anything but his own morals. But even for that, to do that for one NATO country to attack another NATO country for territory, that would be, I think, the most existential threat to NATO that we have seen. And also, Denmark was one of the countries who answered the call from the US. The only time the Article 5 have been triggered was when US did that, and Denmark fought and, of course, lost lives and soldiers in that operation.
And with all this talk about Greenland, one would almost forget the big spat between Brussels and Washington, D.C. over tech rules. Who's standing up to Donald Trump here?
Well, I think the important thing is to say, listen, we have realized our dependencies. Gas on Russia, critical minerals on China, security on the US, and also technology on the US. So, of course, it's about time for Europe to say, listen, we will enforce our rules for our market to be open and contestable. We will look for European suppliers because there is a European demand. And, of course, we want to live a life that is not, 100% digitally dependent because a society is about the relationship between people.
And what about something that's a big concern for our viewers, that Grok's AI tool that's manipulating image of women and girls? What can the EU do here? We saw a very late response yesterday from the Commissioner.
Well, I think it's really important to be tough on this one because you have this wicked combination of nudity and humiliating women. And basically any woman could be, a victim of this. So I think it's really important to stand up for it, both as people, but of course also when the enforcement with the Commission.
OK, Margareta Vestager, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your insights on a number of stories. Thank you. But now it is time to focus on France, where the far leader Marine Le Pen is starting a crucial appeal in court today that could determine whether she can run in next year's presidential elections or not. Marine Le Pen was convicted last year for allegedly misusing EU funding to pay her party staff back home as MEP assistants here in Brussels. For more, we can cross over now to Paris to bring in our correspondent Sofia Katskenkova, who's just outside the courthouse for us this morning. Good morning, Sofia. Just remind our viewers of the details of this case.
Good morning. So, as you said, Marine Le Pen's appeal trial opens this Tuesday afternoon at the Paris Court of Appeals just behind me, and it will be decisive for her political career. She's appealing a conviction, as you said, Maeve, for misusing EU Parliament funds. Judges last year ruled that the money meant to pay EU parliamentary assistance was actually used to fund staff working for her national party between 2004 and 2016. So for that, she was sentenced to 4 years in prison, 2 of which were suspended, a €100,000 fine, and most importantly, banned from holding a public office for 5 years with immediate effect. And so this ban currently blocks her from running for the 2027 presidential election. So this appeal is one of her last legal chances to overturn or soften the original ruling. The hearing will last about a month, and a verdict is expected before the summer. Back to you, Brussels.
So a lot at stake here. Sophia, what could the potential outcomes be? I know we have to wait a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so as you said, the stakes are extremely high, and there are 3 main scenarios. Either she manages to overturn the original ruling, which is seen as highly unlikely, as legal experts have told me, and this would clear the way for her to run in 2027. A partial win, so that means either a reduced or suspended ban, could also keep her in the race. But if the original sentence is confirmed, or even worse, toughened, her presidential ambitions would effectively be over. And this would make Jordan Bardella, her 30-year-old protégé and leader of her National Rally party, the natural candidate for the presidential election. And polls already suggest that he may be more popular than Le Pen and capable of winning a presidential election. And for the EU, the implications of this could be huge.
Indeed, that's why the story is being watched very closely here from Brussels. Sofia Kaczynskova, thank you so much for that update. But now, all eyes back to Iran. The European Parliament has responded to the attacks on peaceful protesters by banning Iranian diplomats, and the EU is also eyeing more sanctions. Jakob Yanis takes a look at how the international community could act.
Welcome to the ultimate game of risk. A battlefield of diplomacy, conflict and conquest. With massive protests on the streets of Tehran, the dice has been rolled. Now the players must choose their options. First, the US. Move 1 is to strike. Last year proved the US can hit Iranian nuclear facilities. And now, fresh from Venezuela, a targeted air campaign is the hard power option. Move 2 is about oil. Trump now controls Venezuela's resources, so he can drive Iran's exports to zero without spiking global oil prices. And there is also a technology card, deploying Starlink terminals that will help to break the internet blackout and coordinate the opposition. Now the EU. No military strikes, but strong economic cards. Move 1 is the trade trap. Germany accounts for a third of all EU-Iran trade. They supply the vital machinery and chemicals that keep Iran's industry alive. Maybe it should be limited. Move 2 is hard diplomacy. Brussels could finally designate the Revolutionary Guard as terrorists, freeze their assets and isolate the regime completely. Finally, Iran's option is to secure the regime at any cost. But life is not a board game where plastic figures are removed from the map. In Iran, real people are being murdered. With hundreds reported deaths, one question arises. How many more lives will the next turn take?
And that report by Jakob Yanis brings this edition of Europe Today to an end. Thank you so much for tuning in. Join back again tomorrow morning. See you then.